Constitution Day Forum. I'm John Reisman, Associate Professor of Economics and Public Policy. And joining me tonight, thank you very much, our panel of Senator Mary Ann Moore and Representative Ann Perry, two experienced legislators. I'm hearing a feedback on that. John, I'm hearing my feedback. I'm hearing my audio a little later.
Yes, there's a little bit of a delay between
okay.
and what you're, about 10 seconds.
All right, I'll just try to ignore it. Okay, I'm going to start tonight by talking a little bit about Constitution Day. In 2004, Congress passed an omnibus spending bill. That is, we didn't actually have a budget, something that's happened frequently. And Senator Byrd, the late Senator Byrd, added a rider to it that said that any educational institution in the United States that accepted federal funds needed to hold an event commemorating the signing of the U.S. Constitution on September 17, 1787. So since then, UMM and all the university campuses, many of our public schools throughout the state and the nation have held some sort of an event to commemorate this signing. And tonight, we're going to be talking about the First Amendment. And I have a document that I'll put up on the screen before we do that, but let me just say that the Constitution signed in 1787 set up the framework for our government and set up the powers that each branch of the federal government would have. But the First Amendment, part of the Bill of Rights, didn't actually pass until 1791, and it was basically the price that some members of our young democracy demanded to have the Constitution accepted. And the difference, the Bill of Rights puts limits on the government's power, where the Constitution proper itself sets out what the government's powers are. I'm going to share a document I have up here, and here it is. The government's powers. Just a couple of, I don't know if you're seeing it again now, but then I had a definition of hate speech up: public speech that expresses hate or encourages violence toward a person or group based on something such as race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. And then just a brief mention of a very consequential Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, from 2010, which was a landmark decision of the court concerning campaign finance. The court held that the free speech clause of the First Amendment prohibits the government from restricting independent expenditures for political communications by corporations, labor unions, and other associations. So given that, I think I seem to have lost my ability to get my full screen back up here, but no, okay. At this point, let me ask Senator Moore and then Representative Perry to make some brief introductory remarks about what this event means to them and what their concerns and issues that they may have before we get to specific questions. So Senator Moore, you need to take your mute off.
There we go. How's that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you, John, and good evening, everyone that is out there in cyberspace. My name is Mary Ann Moore, and I currently serve as the state senator for District 6, which covers all of Washington County, along with Goldsboro, Winter Harbor, and Sullivan in Hancock County. When I think about our First Amendment, I feel very blessed that I live in America and have the freedom I have for such things as freedom of speech and the freedom to worship wherever I want to. Growing up as the eldest child of a military father, our travels throughout the United States confirmed just how lucky we are to be an American. While living in Japan for 3 years and in my travels as an adult, I did not always witness the same freedoms in other countries. We often witnessed discord in the various countries, regardless of the nationality of the protesters. We also often witnessed worshipers gathering in quiet, non-public locations just to worship or read the Bible, their Bible of choice. I remember being quite concerned about what we viewed. As I read over the First Amendment, noting the time frame of its ratification to be almost 229 years ago, yet it remains one of the most important amendments for us as American citizens. So I look forward to the discussion and the questions this evening as we go forward.
Thank you, Senator Moore. Representative Perry, you need to take your mute off.
Thank you. And I'm Representative Perry, and I represent House District 140. In terms of Constitution Day and the Constitution, I've had the pleasure of really being able to do a lot of historic research, not only just on the Constitution, but in the beginnings of this country to begin with at a New York State historic site, which really brought us through the French and Indian War and the Revolutionary War. And a lot of the discord that brought us to the revolution and the really difficult decisions that were made to bring forth a constitution after the Articles of Confederation that really fit what this country wanted to be and was looking to be. When I look at the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights, a lot of that is based on the experience of the writers of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, where they had countries that they came from that had state religions that determined that they were going to be in that religion if they were part of the state. The other determinations were rules over free speech, rules over the ability for the press to express the needs, and also for peaceable assembly. And some of the history before we got to the Constitution and the Revolution is really about the experiences that they experienced, with memories of the Boston Massacre, the Tea Party, the work to really come out from under the tyranny of the British government. These Bill of Rights were also based in history, starting from the Magna Carta, as people were looking for their freedom and their ability as individuals to work within a government and within their communities to have the rights they felt every individual should have. And since this time, it has been defined and redefined as the Supreme Court has looked at issues on that and has broadened the definitions in many ways. And it's an exciting time to actually look now in this time how it applies to our everyday lives. And so I look forward to talking a bit more about this, and thank you for the time.
Thank you both for doing your homework.
Yeah, good job, Jane. Great job. I know you love history.
I do.
I know.
And be very topical with all the events that are going on in the country as we speak. So I asked the panelists to consider a number of questions, which I'm thankful that they've clearly prepared for them. The first one, and I'll ask Representative Perry to speak on this one first, since Senator Moore went first on the last question. So this first question is, does freedom of speech include hate speech?
Well, that's, I think that was a ruling of the Supreme Court that it does not, because the intent is to hurt. And I can't remember the ruling on that, but no, it does not include, especially from one individual to the other. And that has been a tough decision by the court that was made. So at this point, no, it's not.
Senator Moore.
Well, and when I reviewed the definition of freedom of speech, as you shared with us, John, at the very beginning, it is right. You know, it's the right to express any opinions without censorship or restraint. And I feel that when one chooses to express their opinions, they should do it without hate, without violence, but rather as a tool for peace. I recently heard a comment from an organizer of the local unity vigils that are going around in Eastport and Machias area. And what she said, I thought was so good, where she said, we stand as beacons for unity, peace, and justice during this time of division. I thought it was very well said, because that's what we're looking at. It does not mean that one has the right to destroy or take away for the destruction and the looting that we have witnessed over the last couple of months.
Right.
Violence and hate do not grow unity and peace, no matter what we're doing.
I believe the court has been quite clear that the freedom of speech does not cover fighting words or incitement to violence. The question is where that line is drawn when words, if words become bullets, or are they just words? So it is, and as a public university, this is particularly difficult for us because universities are committed to free inquiry and freedom. Although a private university has every right to restrict speech, just as a private company does. The First Amendment deals with the government, but we are a public university at UMM. We're essentially an arm of the government. And so the whole question of speech codes becomes very difficult for public universities. Yes, we don't want speech that makes any member of our community feel or not have access to the educational opportunity that we are committed to providing. So that type of speech is very problematic for us. But as where Colby, Bates, or Bowdoin can forbid that kind of speech, the university system and the community colleges as public institutions have some difficulties there. Comments or questions? I know both of you have had some experience in higher ed, both as students and instructors and staff members. And you were saying before that you taught at Husson. They're a private institution. They're not bound by the First Amendment. So any thoughts or issues? Speech becomes, we need to have more discussion in the country, but we're shouting at each other rather than listening. So it becomes problematic.
Yeah, it does. Well, I think it's really, and it's been all through the times of really work around speech, it's that balance between the individual right and the needs of society. And I think that that balance, the Supreme Court has been very cautious to look at, but there are times when even their own decisions are turned over by another Supreme Court. And a lot of it really is dependent upon the situation and the culture at the time. So as we move forward, I think we will see some things change and some things remain the same. It is difficult as a public university, knowing that you are an arm of the government, that there are some restrictions that you do have. But I think with any institutions, you do balance the right of the individual to the needs of the society.
And I think we've seen that. My experience has always been with the public universities. Yeah. But you see that though there's that balance, that they realize that we do across the board, there need to have policies in place. We need to be respectful of others. And that's that bottom line foundation and saying, okay, we do need to be cautious. Yes, we have freedom of speech, but we also have to be careful in how it's being implemented or how it's being expressed on the campus itself.
Yes, and of course on the campus, you've got young people who may not have a lot of experience with tempering speech, and those of us who are a bit older who may not have it either. So, but yes, thanks for those comments. This remains a contentious issue in higher education. Less so possibly in K through 12, although I can see how it may be an issue in the high schools occasionally. So, anything else, or shall I move on? I'm monitoring the chats to see if John's gonna, if anyone in the audience sends in questions, I'll send them over to you. Okay. Second, does freedom of religion conflict with LGBTQ rights? And this is, again, something that's, right out of the headlines that as legislators, both of you have probably had to deal with some of this in bills that are proposed or in testimony that you've heard. So I'll start with Senator Moore on this one, since we started with Representative Perry last time.
Sure, I appreciate that, John. When I looked at when I was preparing for tonight, when I looked up the definition of freedom of religion, it states the right to practice whatever religion one chooses. And I personally do not feel LGBTQ represents a religion, but rather a sexual preference or a lifestyle. And I heard someone say recently, when God created men and women, he created them in his likeness. That's what's always been quoted, regardless of skin color or sexual orientation. God loves us all as we are. And so the word conflict kind of bothered me, being incompatible or at variance or clash. In my opinion, LGBTQ folks have the same rights as anyone else to practice their religion of choice. And I don't believe that that's a religion per se.
Okay. Representative Perry.
I'm going to be in agreement with Senator Moore in terms of I do not believe it is a religion, but I do see a conflict societally in some religions, but that's not all. And so the freedom of religion is the tenets of a religion has the right to practice the way they feel they should. But that does not mean that the LGBT community cannot practice religion as well. So freedom of religion is not related to sexual orientation or what your sex is, for that matter, on that part of it, but really is the ability to practice a belief, regardless of what your lifestyle is.
I think you both made good points here. Maybe when I drafted the question, I probably should have been a little clearer, because I was thinking about the cases that we've seen with bakers or florists who have been unwilling to provide their service for a gay wedding or a same-sex marriage, and have argued that that refusal was based upon their religious beliefs. And we've had some the courts have, as you pointed out earlier, and sometimes the courts go back and forth on this. And we've had a couple of decisions out of Colorado that don't really seem to make a lot of sense, where in one case they said yes, and in another they said no. So I'm not quite sure. This is still evolving here. And again, we have clear laws about against discrimination. But what if there's religious belief that some see as discrimination, while others see it as practicing their religion?
I think that's a difficult balance, because and I think this is what came out in the case with the cake, is that they are offering a public service of their business. So do they have the right to discriminate on that basis? And in terms of they're calling that the practice.
Right, just like if you're renting an apartment or I mean, you're in the public square, you're public service,
Yeah.
public accommodation. So, yes, that does seem to be the situation. But we get decisions,
Next time.
and it's become quite contentious.
We had that as well when the Affordable Care Act came out, and the ability to get insurance for birth control.
Yeah.
And the difficulty is one religious belief actually affecting the ability for others to access a service, or is this a government, and this is the question, is this a government saying, you know, you have to do this regardless of your religious belief? So that's a difficult conundrum, because
Yes.
I think both are right.
That's the Little Sisters of the Poor case, I believe, and it's very difficult. Yes, you're in the freedom of conscience versus freedom from discrimination. So yeah, it's very often rights. I'm not a lawyer, but often rights are not absolute because there's conflicts. What both of you have talked about balancing. So. Okay, and again, this is one that's going to continue. We're going to continue to see these difficulties pop up. Okay. Any other comment you wanted to add on those? No. Okay. Okay. So the third question I put together was: should the First Amendment be amended to end Citizens United, decision that I talked about a little earlier, that's been quite controversial. It's been in place for a decade now. And dark money. Both of these are, I'll just say first that the Citizens United decision was a challenge to the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law that prohibited the election communications from certain groups 90 days before an election. And that's what the Supreme Court said. They took that narrow issue and said, no, that's not allowed, but then expanded it to say, based upon previous decisions where they had held that money was a form of speech, that you had to allow independent expenditures from anybody, corporations, unions, other associated groups. And that the government could not prohibit them under the First Amendment. And that led to all kinds of, that led to the formation of super PACs. The issue of dark money is related, but a little different. Dark money is anonymous speech. You don't know who's saying it. There's a long history of anonymous speech in America, starting with Tom Paine's Common Sense before the American Revolution. And there's good reasons to protect anonymous speech, but there's also reasons to want to know who's speaking. And in our election season here, both of these issues, as we're bombarded by independent expenditures in the Senate race on both sides, on all sides, we don't know where the money's coming from, and it's millions of dollars that no one has ever seen anything like this in the state of Maine before. And it's driving a lot of us crazy because you don't even want to listen to the TV or the radio because of just incessant back and forth, and so that led to there's a proposal in the U.S. Senate to amend the First Amendment to overturn. To amend the First Amendment to overturn Citizens United. There's another proposal in the House called the Disclose Act to end dark money, to force this to be at least open. If you can't, if you leave Citizens United in place, you can't prevent super PACs and corporations and unions from speaking, but you can at least know where the money's coming from. So both of these require amending either the Supreme Court to change their decisions, which doesn't happen very often, or constitutional amendments to amend the First Amendment. So, and fortunately for both of you and for Washington County, I don't think we're seeing super PACs in your races or dark money, to my knowledge, but we have seen them in state Senate races in Maine. We saw, and not just in the U.S. Senate races, but in state legislative races. I don't know about the House, but possibly it's more likely in a state Senate race. But so it's not out of the means of possibility that it could affect. It's already affecting us indirectly, and it may affect us directly sooner than we like. So with that, I think you're up first, Representative Perry, on this question of should we amend the First Amendment to end Citizens United and dark money?
Well, I guess my question is how the heck would you amend that? It's an interpretation of what could be a very broad definition. And I think, I may not agree with how the Supreme Court made its decision. And it wasn't a unanimous decision. There was a lot of discussion and stuff that went with that. Is how would you change that? Because I think we'd lose the ability to interpret, even though it may be different. This First Amendment, although very broad, has freedoms that have been very important to the founders and to us today. And with those freedoms, obviously comes that responsibility of how we are living in society and what that should look like. The Supreme Court is there to help with that interpretations as we have disagreements. And this is a decision that was made. I may not agree with it, and I may agree with it. It's but it's something I'm certainly willing to live with. And if there is much more that goes with that, then somebody will come up and ask the Supreme Court to take another look. And I think that's the way to go. To change the amendment as it is right now, I think would be a very not a good idea.
The slippery slope argument.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it is a potentially dangerous precedent, but I'll let Senator Moore in just for a second, but I think on both sides of the aisle, we're all kind of just appalled by what's going on. Senator Moore.
Right, and I agree with Representative Perry and exactly what she's saying. I don't think amending the First Amendment is the answer. While there may be some, we've looked at it, the spending is out of control and outrageous on the Congress level. And like you said, I don't even want to turn on the TV anymore. I've just been listening to it over and over and over again. But I think instead of amending the First Amendment, I think what we should do or have Congress take a look at the Federal Election Commission. What are they responsible for? I understand they're pretty dysfunctional. Maybe maybe that's the avenue that we need to go to for them to take a look at the things that the Citizens United are bringing up. They bring up some valid concerns, and same with the dark money, maybe exposing the dark money. Like within Maine here, we have the Maine Ethics Commission. And that's where the Clean Election Fund falls. And both Representative Perry and myself are clean election candidates. We have to report every penny that we've collected, every penny that we spend. It's all public knowledge. And I think that's what's important, and that's the way it should be. That's what we owe to our citizens when we were running for election. And I think that's what needs to be done on a federal level. And really, that should be what the Federal Election Commission is doing. Not modifying the amendment to go with it.
So yes, you are both running as publicly funded clean election candidates. HR 1, first bill that the House took up last session and passed in the House, didn't get a vote in the Senate, would take Maine's clean election model. It modifies it somewhat, but small contributions would be matched on a 6-to-1 basis for federal office holders, federal House and Senate, and that's again part of the effort. That as any campaign finance law will get challenged and have to go to the Supreme Court ultimately if it were to become law. So yes, it remains part of this is in 1976 the court in their first post Watergate decision, Buckley versus Vallejo, ruled that money was a form of speech, and therefore you could limit how much money people could give to candidates directly, but not how much they could spend of their own money or that could be spent independently. First Amendment issue, and what the efforts to amend the First Amendment have to do with going directly to Buckley versus Vallejo and saying money is not a form of speech, and that's problematic because, as both of you know, it's difficult to run a communications campaign of any kind without spending money. Now, how much money do you need to spend? That depends on how big your district is, and whether you're in Boston or Portland. One of Maine's problems that we're facing right now is that we're a cheap date. Media expenditures in Maine for television is a fraction of what it is in Boston or New York or California. So the Senate race, which is attracting all this money, it's because they can really buy a huge amount of advertising in the Maine media markets, much more than they could do in California with the same amount of money. So, and I don't think that either Speaker Gideon or Senator Collins is particularly happy about the fact that they don't have much control over what the campaign is discussing, because their expenditures are only a very small portion of what's being spent on communications, and it's unfortunate, but no one seems to have an answer.
Yeah.
So, and we have this contentious race, which, at the end, I'm wondering whether the winner will be the loser. Okay. Well, our panel is somewhat smaller than I had hoped for, but I do appreciate both of you coming on and sharing your thoughts and doing your homework on this issue. I hope some of our students are watching. I got a question from it's a comment from Bonnie Fortini. Both of you may know Bonnie. I'm not sure. She's a staff member at UMM. Freedoms that are rights carry responsibilities with them, which help define the limits of allowed speech versus hate speech. We often seem to forget about the responsibilities, responsible parties' part. I think I might have mangled that a little bit, or maybe John Stentz did, but so her comment is, the rights and responsibilities go together on this matter, and it's, I think, worth noting. And we often forget free speech doesn't mean that it's without consequences. You're responsible for what you say. You can't be discriminated against for it, but you can certainly be. There can be consequences for particularly if what you're saying is not true. I mean, the First Amendment doesn't require that you tell the truth, but there may be consequences if you're not. Of course, what the truth is or is not is becoming increasingly hard to determine sometimes. This is, and I wonder. Campaign season doesn't seem to be the time to be trying to figure out what the truth actually is, but okay. Responsibilities part. Okay, that's just John just clarified that. It's any comment on that? Rights versus responsibilities, or just want to pat Bonnie on the head, say anything?
Well, I think that Oops,
Hmm?
Mary Ann, are you going to?
Go ahead, Ann. Go ahead.
Well, I think that's the balance. That's the balance that we talk about, is that rampant rights then affects the people around you. And unless you're looking at the people around you, you have some responsibilities for them as well. And we are social beings. We are not by ourselves. And with those freedoms also gives us the responsibility to ensure that our neighbor has those same freedoms. And we can't do that by stepping on them.
And so often I find myself saying what Dr. Covey always said, we have to agree to disagree and go on, and don't make that such an issue. Just agree to disagree and go on and continue to be neighbors and, to work together or whatever it takes.
Let me touch on that point a second, Mary Ann, because it just seems to me that you're talking about being a member of a community and rights and responsibilities to go with that. But we're so divided as a nation. I wonder, the sense of community I hope it's not, there's a new book of political science called The Fractured Republic. And I just wonder whether we're fractured in that sense. And the fracture hasn't been set, and it can't, you can't fix a broken arm until it can't heal until the fracture's set and put back into place. I don't see that our communities, the one path is more discussion, civil discussion. I don't know that and I'm as guilty as anyone else of falling into that tribalism pact, but it is difficult I sense the bonds of community are pretty afraid in the country today. So any thoughts on how we can, how can we think of our fellow citizens who we disagree with, but that are our countrymen, not our enemies?
Well, I'm not sure really exactly how to respond to that, John. I do know that, and Ann and I talk about this often, our Washington County delegation works so well together. We are together at the State House, regardless of party, because we know how important it is for us to take care and watch out for the things that affect the people in Washington County. And I think that's a great example. And we oftentimes we go to dinner on Wednesday night and we can sit there at the table, and sometimes we agree to disagree, but we don't hold it against each other, and we don't argue, we don't get angry, we don't stop speaking to each other. We continue to work together. And sometimes the conversation changes our mind. Maybe I was looking at it from a different aspect, and then when Representative Perry explained it, wow, I hadn't thought of that. And you're exactly correct. So we work together in doing that. And I think that is probably the model that we should try to do. I mean, we're doing it on a county level, but even if we could do that on a state level and even into Congress, that would be such a refreshing situation.
Yeah. So you have a common purpose that unites you.
And I think the piece of it is we each understand that we're serving the same constituency.
Absolutely.
This is not about me. What I'm here is to serve the people that I am representing.
Right.
I'm not representing one party. I'm not representing, an ideology. I'm representing people who are every day trying to make it through their lives, and the issues that they bring to me that are important to them, that we all see and we can agree on.
Right. I wanted to comment that 25 years ago, the Washington County delegation met for Wednesday morning breakfasts.
We moved to dinner, so what can I say, right?
And as a young staffer for Governor King, I remember being invited and being told that I had to make sure that nobody picked up my check because I was, for ethics reasons.
Well, I do know that there's a lot of counties that are envious of us. Mm-hmm. They go, wow, you guys talk to each other? But we do. Mm-hmm. And like Ann said, we share the same constituents regardless of party. And that's so important. But yeah, we meet for dinner instead of breakfast. So
we do better at that too.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any additional questions coming in from John. I want to give each of you an opportunity to just give a summary statement. And I do want to say thank you very much for participating in this Constitution Day. It is an important event for the country. The First Amendment is pretty near and dear to me, and I'm quite grateful for your participation tonight. So, Representative Perry, do you want to start us off, or summary remarks as short as you like?
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to go back to a time of discord. I just got done reading, again, my interest in history, a great biography of Frederick Douglass by David Bright.
Yeah.
And he really did a good job of explaining the politics around all of this. And when I go back and I look at what happened after the Civil War, with the lack of actually reconstruction that happened because of the death of the president and the people who followed, the discord at that time sounded as frightening as what we're seeing today. And I look at that and saying, we were able to make it through, and to be able to function and have a time when we did well. And I am hoping that this is just another cycle, that we get a little further on solving our problems, and that we have a time of respite before we go to the next big issue. So let's get through this. Let's try to look at this as positively as we can, and move forward with hope.
Great
Thank
point,
you.
Representative Perry. They're very well said, for sure. I know you love your history buff as it is, though. But thank you. I do appreciate the university hosting this event and to commemorate the signing of it. And I appreciate your role, John, as the moderator. I do wish that some of the other members of our delegation had been able to attend tonight. It just didn't work out for them as well. But as public servants, I feel like we should all strongly support the U.S. Constitution and the rights of the citizens that we serve, and hope to serve in the near future. And so I think Representative Perry said it right well. We need to move forward, and hopefully we'll be moving forward even better. And it'll be a better place that we're going to be seeing as we come out of it. So thank you.
Thank you both. I will close with I grew up in Philadelphia, site of the Constitutional Convention, and as we're drilled in elementary school with the famous Philadelphian Ben Franklin's words upon emerging from the Constitutional Convention, was asked whether we had a republic or a monarchy, and he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." So,
yeah, good point.
Thank you very much, and we are recording this, and I'll send you the link as soon as it's all set up. Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night, everybody.
Right.